Hi everybody, welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. I got an email from the Winks, subject line, generating its own light? What if it's Christ? And then there's a link for an article. And I immediately wondered, is this in reference to what they think is an interstellar comet called 3I Atlas that has exhibited some strange characteristics, this being the most recent. I also heard about this from my friend Mindy with Temples of Jesus. She has a Second Coming channel. Make sure to subscribe to her. I'll put a link for it in the description box below. But yeah, we're going to look at futurism. There's a number of different articles, but I want to look at this one. Mysterious object hurtling toward us from beyond solar system appears to be emitting its own light, scientists find. Okay, so why am I interested in this in case you're new or you haven't thought about this before? I'm interested in this because is this potentially the sign of the Son of Man? This is supposed to be essentially like one of the last things to happen before Christ comes, or it is actually Christ coming with the hosts of heaven. And I think that's what it is. But why would I think that if this is something that's in space or if it's a comet? Well, let's just do a quick review before we continue on. And there's some really interesting things to think about with this one. Let's go to my spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z. This is currently row 533 for Sign of the Son of Man. So we have this quote from Joseph Smith. You can pause and read the whole thing. I'm just going to read the last part here. You can find this on Joe Smith Papers. Discourse, April 6th, 1843, B, as reported by James Burgess. He says, "Then shall they see the sign of the coming of the Son of Man in the clouds of heaven. How are we to see it? Answer, as the lighting up of the morning, or the dawning of the morning cometh from the east and shineth unto the west, so also is the coming of the Son of Man. The dawning of the morning makes its appearance in the east and moves along gradually, so also with the coming of the Son of Man be. It will be small at its first appearance and gradually becomes larger until every eye shall see it. Shall the saints understand it? Oh yes, Paul says so. Shall the wicked understand? Oh no, they attribute it to a natural cause. They will probably suppose it is two great comets coming in contact with each other. It'll be small at first and will grow larger and larger until it will be all in a blaze so that every eye shall see it." So I don't know exactly how this is going to play out. One possibility that I entertain is that it's Christ coming with the hosts of heaven. He's approaching Earth potentially. And as the Earth rotates, and we see this object approaching us, just like the sun, it goes from east to west, and then it gets larger and larger, probably because it's approaching Earth. And when an object gets closer to you, it appears larger. That's my best guess. I don't know. But the key part in what I just read, in reference to what we're talking about in this video, is the scientists, the people of the world, are going to think that it's just some natural occurrence. Until, of course, it gets brighter and brighter and brighter, and it's all in a blaze, like Joe Smith said. But at first, it's going to be small, and people are going to think that it's a comet. In this quote, this is manuscript history of the church. You can also find this on Joe Smith Papers. This is from the same discourse, but I want to read how it's worded here. This is like a different account. "Then will appear one grand sign of the Son of Man in heaven. But what will the world do? They will say it is a planet, a comet, etc. But the Son of Man will come as the sign of the coming of the Son of Man, which will be as the light of the morning cometh out of the east." This is what leads me to believe that the sign of the Son of Man is actually Christ coming with the hosts of heaven, because that's what it sounds like to me. It says, but the Son of Man will come as the sign of the coming of the Son of Man. But let's move on to the last one that I want to share. This is from Elder Bruce R. McConkie of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. This is from The Millennial Messiah, The Second Coming of the Son of Man, pages 418 to 420. Let's see. The sign of the coming of the Son of Man. What is it? We do not know. Our revelation says simply, and immediately there shall appear a great sign in heaven, and all people shall see it together. Doctrine and Covenants 88:93. I'm going to skip down talking because he reads the quote that we just read from Joseph Smith, and then he says, "Then the prophet quoted the famous statement from Amos, 'Surely the Lord God will do nothing, but he revealeth his secret unto his servants, the prophets.'" Amos 3:7. Indicating that when the sign is given, the Lord's servants, the prophets, including all the faithful saints, will know it for what it is, and thus be made aware that the long-expected day has arrived. Now, something really interesting, this is one last thing before we start talking about 3i Atlas. We've had a recent reference to the sign of the Son of Man by President Nelson in the October 2022 General Conference in his talk. This is his main talk called Overcome the World and Find Rest. It's the same talk where he called on the church to be the people of the second coming. Earlier in the talk, he says, "But my dear brothers and sisters, so many wonderful things are ahead. In coming days, we will see the greatest manifestations of the Savior's power that the world has ever seen. Between now and the time he returns with power and great glory, he will bestow countless privileges, blessings, and miracles upon the faithful." So you see the footnote 1 for with power and great glory. When you click on that, it takes you to Joseph Smith Matthew 36. "Then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory." I've looked it up using the Scripture Citation Index and other tools, and no president of the church has ever referenced this scripture in General Conference. And so you have to wonder, we've had these different interstellar objects that have been observed. Up until this point, there's been 4 by my count. The first one appeared in 2014, and then the next one in 2017 in October, just a few months before President Nelson became president of the church. And then in 2019, we have this one. So I'm wondering, he is the prophet of God. And this might be some kind of procession. I mean, maybe they are just natural objects, but maybe they're not. Maybe there's some kind of procession, some kind of thing that's going on that's leading up to the sign of the Son of Man and the second coming. So let's go ahead and go back to the article. This is why I'm so interested in this. Okay, futurism. Mysterious object hurtling toward us from beyond the solar system appears to be emitting its own light, scientists find. It notes that this is only the third ever observed interstellar object. Again, I don't know why the articles keep doing this, because the first one, and these are my references right here in column L. I have space.com, I have independent, and there's many others. Maybe they put this in a different class because this was actually found on Earth. It was a piece of I don't know if it was like the whole meteorite or whatever, but they found it on Earth, and it's not in space right now. But we have this one, CNEOS 2014-0108, also known as IM1. So by my count, this is the first ever observed interstellar object. After that, we have Oumuamua in 2017, which they believed was an asteroid, but they're not really sure because it was so unusual. It got a lot of attention because of how unusual it was. And then 2019, we have 2i Borisov. So I don't know. By my count, there's 4. Okay, continuing. The object dubbed 3i Atlas has caught the attention of Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb, who has a long track record of making controversial predictions about previous interstellar objects being relics from an extraterrestrial civilization. While there's been a growing consensus among astronomers that the latest object is a comet, Loeb has continued to entertain the idea that it may have been sent to us by an intelligent species from outside of the solar system, and he's far from backing down. In a blog post over the weekend, and that's what we're going to hop to next, and he explains why he thinks that this is different, that it's not a comet, and there's some pretty good reasons. Just because there's consensus among astronomers doesn't mean that that's right. It's just that's everybody's, or the majority of scientists' best guess as to what's going on. But there's some really interesting things to think about. And I want to point out, I've been interested in Avi Loeb. I don't necessarily think that it's an alien spacecraft or probe or anything like that. I'm not saying that he's right about that. But one thing that interests me about him is this. So Abraham Avi Loeb is an Israeli and American theoretical physicist who works on astrophysics and cosmology. Loeb is the Frank B. Baird Jr. Professor of Science at Harvard University, and then it goes on to talk about his other credentials. So I think it's interesting because he's Jewish. There was another time back in the 90s, I think, where you had another Jewish astronomer that observed, I think it was Shoemaker Levy 9. I just think that it's interesting whenever you have, someone who's Jewish or a member of the church that's involved in a story like this. So I just want to point this out. And also, he said this. I think that this is interesting. We're looking at jasoncolavito.com, but I'm using this website because the original website is one where you have to pay for a subscription, but you have the excerpt right here. But I did verify it. This is something that Avi Loeb said. Loeb took the idea and suggested looking for hope from above, in reference to the Messiah, the Jewish Messiah. Quote, "My personal belief is that the Messiah will arrive not necessarily from Brooklyn, as some Orthodox Jews believe, but rather from outer space," Loeb told the group. The extraterrestrial Messiah's message, he said, would be to stop fighting over territory here because, quote, "because there is much more real estate available throughout the universe." So, from that statement, it seems like he is probably like a secular Jew, but a Jew nonetheless. And it's interesting, him talking about Messiah. You have secular Jews that don't really expect a Messiah, but still there might be something kind of there. And who knows, maybe when Christ comes, maybe he would actually accept Christ. And I don't know. But that's something to think about. Let's go ahead and go to this blog post. This is Medium. Does 3i Atlas generate its own light? This blog post was published 3 days ago. The best image we have so far of the new interstellar object 3i Atlas was obtained by the Hubble Space Telescope on July 21st, 2025. All right, so here it is right here. The image shows a glow of light, likely from a comma, ahead of the motion of 3i Atlas towards the sun. There is no evidence for a bright cometary tail in the opposite direction. This glow was interpreted as evaporation of dust from the sun-facing side of 3i Atlas. Okay, so this is what they thought was going on. This glow, it's evaporating dust from the sun-facing side. And there's no tail, which I don't know if all comets have tails. I'm not sure, but they note that, or he notes that in this blog post. Later on, as he is describing the glow that's coming from this object, it says, such a slope, so it's referring to these like measurements and putting it on a graph. Such a slope is steeper than observed in solar system comets. Together with my brilliant colleague, Eric Keto, we realized that the observed slope of -4 is consistent with an alternative model in which the dust flow around 3i Atlas is illuminated by a central source. This model naturally accounts for the steep brightness profile. Okay, so it's just saying that when you observe the light that's being emitted from it, it doesn't match other comets. And it seems like the light, according to these two, is actually coming from a central source, or in other words, the nucleus of the quote-unquote comet. Okay, later on, if 3i Atlas generates its own light, then it could be much smaller than expected from a model in which it reflects sunlight. The reflected model requires a diameter of up to 20 kilometers, which is unattainable given the limited reservoir of rocky material in interstellar space can only deliver such a giant rock once per 10,000 years or longer. Okay, so if I'm understanding this correctly, he's saying, okay, this probably is not a giant rock or object, because if it was, they only come around every 10,000 years. So that probably isn't what it is. Although if that is what it is, then it must be about 20 kilometers. Now I have Google Earth pulled up, and let me stretch this out to 20 kilometers. So we're looking at the Kansas City area. And if you go from the border with Kansas and then stretch this line out to Independence, it basically goes from downtown Kansas City to the eastern part of Independence. So if it is a solid object, which he doesn't think that it is, because he would be assuming, oh, well, if it's an object, it must be, a meteor, or like a asteroid or something, and those only come around every 10,000 years. But if it is an object, this is about how large it would be. So city-sized, which is kind of interesting, because maybe it is a solid object, or maybe it is the hosts of heaven and they take up about 20 kilometers. Okay. Let's continue from there. First, I calculated that the luminosity of 3i Atlas needs to be of order 10 gigawatt. Second, I realized that the steep brightness profile around 3i Atlas implies that the nucleus dominates the observed light. This must hold irrespective of the origin of the light. In other words, the nucleus dominates over the emission from the glow around it. So that means my basic understanding of comets is you have the nucleus, and then around the nucleus you have the comma, which is kind of like an area, like, I don't know if you would describe it as like an atmosphere, but the gases or the material that surrounds the nucleus. And then you have the tail. So nucleus, comma, tail. And if I'm understanding this correctly, he's saying that the light's not coming from the tail, because there is no tail that's been observed. It's not coming from the comma based on his calculations. It's coming from the nucleus itself. That's why up here it said a central source, like the nucleus, the object itself seems to be emitting the light. The illumination by sunlight cannot explain the steep 1/r⁴ power profile of scattered light, where r is the radial distance from the nucleus. Okay, so again, I wouldn't be able to say for sure. So I'm going to go with what he's saying, that it can't be like it can't be a solid object, because they don't come around very often, and even if it was a solid object, this steep profile does not match the scattering of the light. But again, maybe it is large, and maybe it's not reflected sunlight, because this is with the assumption that it's reflected sunlight. What if it is a large object, the host of heaven or something like that, and it's not reflecting sunlight, but it is emitting its own light? Does that make sense? All right, continuing. The simplest interpretation is that the nucleus of 3i Atlas produces most of the light. The nucleus itself. What could constitute the required light source? And here are the two possibilities that he presents. The first one, a natural nuclear source could be a rare fragment from the core of a nearby supernova, which is rich in radioactive material. This possibility is highly unlikely given the scarce reservoir of radioactive elements in interstellar space. Okay, so the first one, well, maybe it comes from a supernova. It's an object that's rich in radiation, and that's why it's giving off its own light. But he says that that's unlikely. Okay, the second option, alternatively, 3i Atlas could be a spacecraft powered by nuclear energy, and the dust emitted from its frontal surface might be from dirt that accumulated on its surface during its interstellar travel. This cannot be ruled out, but requires better evidence to be viable. So, I'm not a scientist, but I know that other scientists find Avi Loeb controversial, like we just read. But just because others feel that way, or even the majority of others feel that way, it doesn't mean that he's wrong. And of course, just like we were talking about in this video, it doesn't mean that he's right with his guesses. It could be something else that nobody else is considering. Scientists are not going to look at something like this and think, oh, you know what, that might be Jesus Christ. So, and that kind of makes sense. You have a mysterious object that can't really be explained. The majority of people want to go with a conventional explanation. You have this person, Avi Loeb, that thinks outside of the box. And I don't know, maybe he's thinking very logically and rationally. And, sometimes the truth is scarier than fiction. It's stranger than fiction. And it's hard for people to accept, things that they're not familiar with. So let's see. Here's the comet or whatever it is, just so you can get an idea. It's going to pass really close to Mars. Here's Earth on the opposite side of the sun as it passes through the inside of Mars' orbit, and then it continues on. Or maybe what'll happen is it'll change course and it'll come directly for Earth. I don't know. But right now, it looks like maybe around October, November, with this trajectory, is when it'll be the closest to Earth, around that time frame. Of course, if it's not a comet, if it's not an asteroid, it could always accelerate, change course, and maybe be here sooner, for all anybody knows. Let's go back to the blog post. This leaves us with the interpretation of the brightness profile around 3i Atlas as originating from a central light source. Its potential technological origin is supported by its fine-tuned trajectory, visualized here, and that's what we were just looking at. Let's go back to futurism. There's one more thing I wanted to read from here. Loeb previously argued that the object's unusual trajectory, which includes suspiciously close flybys of both Earth and Jupiter, and its lack of a visible tail, both undermine the theory that it's a comet. So, unusual trajectory, lack of a visible tail. And then I would add to this what the article is actually talking about, the fact that it seems that the nucleus or the object itself is emitting light. So light emission, unusual trajectory. and then lack of a visible tail. Intriguingly, 3I Atlas will come within spitting distance, at least in astronomical terms, of Mars this fall, giving us a tantalizing opportunity to have a first-hand look. Loeb suggested using NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter to point its scientific instruments at the rare visitor. So, I mean, I don't know, you tell me, but I think that this might be the best candidate that we've seen so far since I've started this channel of the sign of the Son of Man. We have seen some strange things. We saw this one comet that had an unusual shape and it changed colors. It was 12P Pons Brooks. It was potentially visible during the 2024 Great American Eclipse if you were in the path of totality. I didn't see it, but a lot of, space websites were talking about that. We've seen other things, and we've seen things happen on special days, but as far as being an actual candidate to be the sign of the Son of Man, this is probably the best one. If it's emitting its own light, I mean, geez, come on. That's what you would expect from Christ coming with the hosts of heaven. Again, Bruce R. McConkie says we don't know what the sign is, so maybe there is like a separate sign that attends Christ coming with the hosts of heaven. Maybe there are two different things. I don't know. So that's something else to consider. If it is a separate phenomenon from Christ in the hosts of heaven, then that could make this even more likely the sign of the Son of Man. Given all the unusual characteristics. So sorry, one more time. So they believe it's an interstellar object. And I want to point out that from what I've read, the way that they know that, or the reason why they think anything is an interstellar object, is because once it's observed, they do the calculations, they look at the trajectory and speed, and then they make the assumption that, well, based on this set of facts, it can't be from our solar system because it's going too fast. It's not like they have some kind of sensor network throughout the solar system and they are able to observe it outside the solar system. I think every single time, it's just simply once it's observed inside the solar system, once it's detectable, either optically or by something else, then they interpret the data and determine whether they think it's outside the solar system. So, okay, so one more time. The unusual things about this: it's believed to be interstellar. It doesn't have a tail. It has an unusual trajectory, and then it's emitting its own light. So that's 4 strange things about this object, and it would already be strange if just one of these was happening. If it was just simply an interstellar object, or if it was just simply emitting its own light. One of those things by itself would make it unusual and noteworthy, but there are 4. So I don't know. You tell me, what do you think? But I will point out that this is happening after, just last year, the October 2024 General Conference. That's when President Nelson gave his big Second Coming talk. He's talked a lot about the Second Coming, but that's like the one talk during his presidency that was all about the Second Coming. And that was his last talk before his 7-year anniversary as president of the church. And at that point, he was in his 7th year. So, he was progressing through his 7th year as president of the church, and it's completed on the anniversary. So there's a lot to think about with this one. By the way, let's just close on this. So this is Google Earth, but this is my Google Earth project called Church Sites. I am going to all these church sites and mapping them on Google Earth. There's more than what you probably realize, so the link for this is in the description box below. And I'm also getting footage of all these locations on my channel called Explore Church Sites. I'm doing commentary on my videos, so I'm finding so many just interesting things. The sites that I didn't even know existed. And I have more on the way. There's more that I haven't even published yet. So please use this as a resource. Okay, that's going to be for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.